So for the first talk of the day, we have Divyanshu Bhardwaj from CISPA Helmholtz Center for Information Security. He's going to talk us about smartphone theft and in particular how users prepare and react to such. So go ahead.
All right. Can you guys hear me? Yep. Perfect. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. Thank you, Kim, for the introduction. I'm Divyanshu, and today I'll be here talking about our paper, Understanding How Users Prepare for and React to Smartphone Theft, an issue that is increasingly common, yet vastly unexplored. And before we dive in, I'd like to give you a quick sense of what my research group does, what I do, and where this work fits in. All right, so I'm a PhD student at the Usable Security and Privacy group of Katharina Kromholz at CISPA in Germany. And so my group looks at usable security and privacy, which essentially means we want to make security and privacy work for people in the real world. We aim to understand behaviors and mental models such that we can design systems that protects people's privacy and safety without making their lives harder. So my group at CISPA works on a wide range of topics from authentication design, privacy perceptions, security for wearables, how policy affects everyday users, and more. We combine lab studies, large-scale surveys, in-depth interviews to understand both technical and the human sides of security. We all know that if security gets in the way of daily tasks, people tend to find workarounds. So at our group, we try to bridge this gap and focus on how to align human behavior, their expectations, and mental models. And yes, that's a slightly old picture of our team with adorable alpacas whom we hiked with. More personally, I've been always drawn to the human side of cybersecurity, and the disconnect between how systems are designed and how people actually use them always fascinates me. We often assume that users will behave in a perfectly rational and technically informed way, but real life is just messier. People forget passwords, click on suspicious links, or reuse pins. And that's not carelessness, that's just being human, right? And so my goal has always been to understand these behaviors and design solutions that are not just technically sound, but also actually fit in to how people live and make decisions, and oftentimes under pressure. And I'd like to give you two quick highlights from CHI 2024. Here, the first work explored wearers' perspectives on camera glasses, looking at the privacy dilemmas people face when using them by means of an in situ diary study. This work was awarded a Best Paper Honorable Mention at CHI and also the Best Poster at SOUPS. The second work examined client-side scanning through interviews with stakeholders from research, industry, policy, and advocacy to understand the competing priorities and also trust boundaries. These studies share a theme, which is that security and privacy questions we face are rarely just technical. Instead, they are deeply entangled with human behavior, perception, and context. And that's also true for phone theft. And so let's now get on with today's talk. Phones today are no longer just tools. They are extremely personal. And for most people, phones have become an extension of themselves, carrying not only just communication, but also access to banking, travel, health applications, personal memories, you name it. Our participants describe their phones as central to how they live and function. To them, losing their phone meant more than just losing hardware. It meant losing access and control over their digital life. So what exactly motivated our research? We started out with a very simple question. What actually happens when someone's phone is stolen, right? And so now imagine this. You're on a crowded subway and someone grabs your phone and is gone in seconds. No warnings. What would you do? Can you even act fast enough? And our research shows us that this is the beginning of an ordeal that people just aren't prepared for. One of our participants quite aptly described the situation, saying, I had everything on my phone, my banking, my credit card, my social media, even personal documents. And so when I lost it, it seemed like a nightmare. And the nightmare for them wasn't just about losing a device, but rather it was losing control over their digital life. Well, phone theft now is a global, common, traumatic, yet critically underexplored phenomena. In London alone, over 100,000 phones were reported stolen in 2024. And while we assume that people could just track or lock their phone, there's limited empirical evidence on user preparedness and reactions to actual theft incidents. So what exactly do we want to understand? Our research was shaped around preparation, response, and recovery from phone theft. We wanted to empirically investigate three broad questions. First, how do people think about and prepare for the possibility of phone theft? Second, how do they respond to phone theft? What are their immediate concerns? Who do they turn to for support? And third, what kinds of harms and threats do they face during recovery? Now let's look at how we went about answering these questions. Our approach was exploratory in nature, given the limited understanding surrounding phone theft. As such, we wanted to use a qualitative research method for our study. Instead of simply guessing how people faced phone theft, this qualitative research method helped us holistically capture the entire experience, from people's preparation, the technical actions, the emotions they feel, the social dynamics, and also the decisions made under stress. This approach fit our study because we needed to explore phone theft. We needed to explore the phone theft space, understand the real-world barriers, and also ground our recommendations. And now let's look at our study design in a little bit more detail. To understand how people experience and respond to smartphone theft, we conducted 20 semi-structured interviews with victims of theft. These weren't participants who were asked to imagine a hypothetical phone theft. Rather, these were people who had actually lived through it. And now you'd ask me, why did we interview real victims? Well, phone theft situations are inherently complex and demand quick decision-making under pressure. They are layered with social stress, anxiety, and sometimes even the fear for personal safety. And as such, to gain a true understanding of its impact, we focused on talking to people who had actually experienced phone theft. Our participants came from 9 countries, and we recruited them via Reddit. We recruited participants through Reddit because it offered us access to recent and first-hand accounts of phone theft, while also helping us reach out to different countries and contexts. We systematically coded the interview transcripts and analyzed them thematically to identify and map out their experience over time. We interviewed people across a range of theft severities, from opportunistic snatching to skilled pickpocketing, and even to cases involving confrontation and physical violence. The variety helped us capture thefts across various contexts and examine how different types of thefts shaped user preparation and their ability to recover. Okay, so let's now look at what we found. Our analysis revealed that the phone theft journey had 3 temporal phases. First, the pre-theft phase, based on people's expectations and preparations. Next, the theft phase, based on the moment of phone loss and their immediate concerns and actions. And the post-theft phase, which was based on recovery, harms, and the consequences of phone theft that people faced. Okay, so now let's look at each one of them separately. In the pre-theft phase, people felt safe. They believed it would never happen to them. Most relied on basic protection methods like screen locks, biometrics, PINs. A few people did report to using 2-factor authentication for some services that they did view as critical. In general, however, there was a clear optimism bias. When theft happened, it triggered shock, helplessness, and even self-blame. People tried to track their phone and activate lost mode, or even contact their bank and service providers. They also leaned heavily on their support network, so friends and family. Some contacted the police for help, but often to only limited effects. Post-theft, people faced economic harm from having to buy a new phone, and psychological as well as reputational harm from the theft incident itself. A few also had to deal with digital identity thefts. Sometimes, attackers impersonated Apple customer support and used sophisticated phishing to try and extract people's account credentials. In general, again, in the post-theft phase, people had to deal with disrupted access to essential services. So, to sum up our results, what does the journey look like? So, before theft, people felt safe, they underestimated the risk of phone theft and relied on basic measures like screen locks to protect themselves. During theft, they panicked, afraid of losing access to photos, financial applications, and private data. Many tried to track their phone or enable lost mode. But post-theft, the real struggle began. Two-factor authentication often locked them out of their own accounts. SIM cards were tied to their national identities, which were difficult to replace. Phishing attempts followed, and people experienced ongoing anxiety. Phone theft is often permanent, and stolen phones are almost never recovered. In our study, only 3 of the 20 participants ever got their phones back. And those recoveries depended on having immediate access to another device that was locked in. This shows how time-critical these recovery actions are. And for the majority of people, no recovery meant having to start their digital life over on a new device. All right, now let's look at some insights from our findings. So, two-factor authentication, which is meant to secure people from unauthorized access, ironically became a barrier, especially if it was tied to the SIM card that was stolen with the phone. It often locked people out of their own accounts, and as such, people began to question if two-factor authentication is indeed working for them or against them. We also noticed certain behavioral shifts in people, which as a consequence of theft, avoided using, for example, the phone in crowded spaces, or even started carrying a burner phone with them in theft-prone areas, like, for example, when attending a concert. This represented a shift in protection measures from technical protections to reliance on non-technical measures from the pre-theft to the post-theft phase. By aggregating the sequence of actions that people took immediately after theft, we also developed high-level behavioral patterns. And here we noticed a clear duality of responses. On the one hand, more tech-savvy people initiated action independently through technical measures. And on the other hand, more social people initiated actions based on social means. Our analysis revealed that the exact order of events did not significantly impact outcomes. However, the key distinction was whether the actions were driven by technical means or social dynamics. In the scenario that the attackers were able to get into the stolen phone, so if they knew the pins as well, people were most afraid of unauthorized access to apps that contained sensitive or personal data. They feared access to financial apps, photos, messengers, social media, email, and even their Notes app, which people remarked often contained critical information like passwords and pins in plain text. All right, so we've walked through what people do before theft, during theft, and after theft, and the barriers they face along the way. Now I want to shift the discussion to what these findings mean for the broader ecosystem and what different stakeholders can do to protect people better. When we talk about improving theft protection, 3 groups stand out as key stakeholders: phone vendors, app developers, and policymakers. Each of them have different capabilities to which they can help people. And so what are phone vendors already doing? The exponential rise in phone theft has pushed vendors to act. Apple introduced the stolen device protection, which adds an extra requirement when device is away from familiar locations and inserts delays or additional biometric checks before key account or device changes can be made. Similarly, Google introduced Android theft protection, which bundles automatic theft detection and safeguards that makes device resets harder and helps lock or limit the device functionality if a theft is detected. These are important steps that do try to limit how much damage phone theft can do. However, our study revealed additional barriers that people face which make it difficult for them to deal with phone theft. And based on the pain points that our participants described, we believe vendors could go further by incorporating 3 additional features: contextual security, social recovery, and informed reassurance. Let's look at each one of them in a bit more detail. First, contextual security, which introduces a contextual high-risk mode that temporarily mandates biometrics on third-party applications. This mode is based on cues like wallet items, location, or calendar, and is automatically triggered in theft-prone environments like concerts or transit hubs. Second, social recovery, that allows pre-approved contacts to trigger lost mode, thereby driving timely response to theft and increasing the odds of phone recovery. And finally, informed reassurance, clearly displaying the backup metadata and status before users lock or erase the device. In our interviews, we had people who were reluctant to remotely wipe the device because they didn't know what was going to be lost and if they could even recover it. And so this reassurance reduces hesitation and helps users act with confidence. As for app developers, they could first warn people about PIN reuse, as people often reuse the same PIN for unlocking apps and also for unlocking the screen and also for unlocking different apps. This causes a potential attack path if the PIN is also stolen. They could also provide emergency account remediations, wherein people are offered quick ways to revoke sessions, reset credentials, and also secure accounts. And finally, they could offer alternative recovery options other than SIM-based two-factor authentication. As SIM-based two-factor authentication is often not enough, apps should be able to support backup codes, email login, and trusted devices as fallbacks. And these changes in app-level recovery design could dramatically improve the resilience against theft. There is also a policy angle. Governments can support centralized theft reporting, limit the resale of stolen parts, and promote and incentivize collaboration of stakeholders to ease the burden that people face dealing with phone theft. This app here, Brazil's Cellular Seguro app, is an example which lets people report stolen phones, thereby triggering coordinated blocks across all 3 key stakeholders like telecom, banks, and digital services. A more coordinated approach like this could prevent people from being stranded after the phone is stolen. All right, at this point, I want to briefly touch about the ethics of this work, which is personally very important to me. Talking about phone theft can bring up stress, frustration for people, and so we approached these interviews very carefully and offered people more than just monetary compensation in return. We looked at phone theft safety advice on the internet, and we found that it was scattered across multiple sources like banks, network providers, law enforcement, each with different language and priorities. And so we consolidated all of this into a single phone theft safety tips website for both Android and iOS users, covering both preventative steps as well as urgent actions to take after phone theft. We also created an printable emergency kit that people could store critical information like their IMEI number, emergency bank and provider helplines, that they could write it down and keep with them in a secure place, hopefully never need it. Both the website and the emergency kit were provided to participants after the study. But here's the thing, even with all the tips and tools, these are just preparations. The threat itself is evolving. And this is where I want to turn to next. Up to now, I've shown you how people prepare for theft, how they react, and what can go wrong. But I want to pause here and really zoom out. In our study, most thefts were still about resale of phone or phone parts. But increasingly, we are seeing something far more sophisticated. Thieves who socially engineer the capture of the unlock pin first and then steal the device next. This can lead to severe damage, drained bank accounts, stolen identities, and the permanent loss of digital assets. The Wall Street Journal has extensively covered this, and this is exactly the kind of threat that's the hardest to recover from. The reality is, given how much of our lives is nowadays on phones, today's theft protection features still seem inadequate. They're scattered across different services, inconsistent in design, and sometimes too complex for people to execute under stress. So to sum it up, what do we take away from all of this? First, people are underprepared due to the optimism bias. While protections do exist, they're scattered and complex in moments of panic. The recovery path is unclear, and two-factor authentication and SIM-based authentication is often backfire, making recovery harder. In our paper, we do suggest recommendations for other key stakeholders to better support people dealing with phone theft. Please read our paper to dig deeper into the experiences behind phone theft and how we can design systems to better support people, or listen to our podcast. Thank you.
Are there any questions?
Sure. Thanks. If I understand correctly, you're encouraging users to have a separate unlock pin and app pins. How realistic does that become from a usability perspective of having, the many pins, many passwords? Do you recommend a password manager? What do you find best?
That's an excellent point. I mean, at some point you just run out of the numbers to remember, and so yeah, this is where technology, future technologies seem to need to work. I mean, what currently is really a thing is passwordless. So if you could just use biometrics for everything that could release pins, so you need to only remember these pins once when you set it up, and then they're like coupled with your biometrics, and then these kinds of passwordless systems would just release your authentication once they have been authenticated with biometrics. Would be cool.
More questions?
Yes.
So I'm wondering about two risks that are at stake there. There is the risk of losing access. And the recovery is mostly about regaining rightful access. And then there is the risk of misuse of confidential data. And the former is quite easy to measure and to assess in your interviews. The latter seems much more elusive. So are the two really at the same level of risk or concern for the users? Are users mostly concerned about recovery rather than loss of data? What's the balance between the two?
I think in the moment that theft happens, people are just like in a state of panic. They don't even realize what could go wrong, right? And once the dust settles down, first of all, of course, users want to somehow regain their device, hope against hope that they get their phone back. But of course, as time passes by, they tend to then think about, okay, there can be other things at stake, and more important stuff could be misused. And so I would have to say that initially, while the first instinct is to try to get the phone back, only later do people realize that there's more important stuff at stake, and somehow I should protect them, or I should have done something to protect them. Yes.
Yeah, so since these participants are from 9 different countries, do you notice differences in terms of their reactions and their level of anxiety?
That's a very good point. So we didn't measure, or they didn't tell us what level of anxiety they suffered, but honestly, I think everyone just was, I couldn't put a scale to it, but everyone was just as anxious as everyone else. There were some cultural differences, especially with regards to going, for example, to law enforcement, wherein, for example, in a country like Germany, people depended a little bit more on law enforcement and thought that, I should really go to the police and at least file a report such that in case in future if something goes wrong and my device is used, I can at least show them a report saying, hey, my phone was lost. But this was, for example, not the case in Southeast Asian countries like Pakistan or India, where people were like, yeah, there's no use of going to the police because they're not going to help us anyway. Yeah.
You mentioned about the social engineering angle where they send this text. Did any of your participants receive that? And what happened, like what was their journey around?
Yeah, this is also a very interesting point. Yes, we did have participants who received this exact same message saying, hey, we are Apple support, we have found your phone, please log in at this link, and then we'll tell you where your phone is. And this one person was also with his brother at the time, and his brother had gone through the same thing, and his brother then told him, no, this is a scam. Don't give them your credentials, because that's what they want, so that they can remove your phone from your iCloud account, and then they're free to resell it as a new iPhone. So this person was safe because he had another relative with him who had undergone the same thing. But this is not the case for people who see it in the first time, because at the moment in the panic, you do anything to get your phone back, and then especially since attackers have gotten so good at impersonating Apple support, it gets really tricky.
And did you, like the Wall Street Journal article that you mentioned, did you find any financial losses of your particular participants?
So there were some impersonation attempts. Some participants did mention that their family members got SMSs saying, hey, this person has now been in an accident and please send money really fast because something urgent needs to be done. But thankfully, nothing too bad, nothing of the level of the article that Wall Street Journal mentions and the cases that they mention, no.
Well, I have a question.
Yes.
Were there some of these preventative or security measures that worked particularly well, or some that worked particularly poorly? For example, like the Find My Phone. I'm not sure if I would go confront some thief necessarily. So
first things first, please don't confront anyone, especially if they're like a thief and steal your phone. This is the first advice we gave to all our participants. But yes, of the 3 people that recovered their phone out of 20, all of them, what they did was instantly go into Find My and turn on lost mode. And what that does is essentially it makes it a brick, right? And then the person who steals it has less incentive to kind of sell it. And so in this case, it did work, but also some other people did it and it really didn't make a difference. But for the three people who really recovered it, this was the thing that really worked. And we had a very interesting anecdote where one of the people who had lost their phone, since when you activate lost mode, you can leave a message saying, hey, this phone is lost. If you find it, please send a text message at this number or call this number. They received a phone call and they were like, yeah, I found your phone. And what do I do with this now? And then this person was pretty sure that the person who was calling them was the actual thief. And he was like, yeah, if you could please put it in the lost and found. And this happened at a train station, by the way. So yeah, this did help. Just that the phone, if it becomes a brick, the thieves who do it, small-time crooks, don't have the incentive to find out means to open the phone again for resale.
Did people turn on lost mode without their phone?
Yes, so only the 3 people who did it had another device logged in. So like an iPad with them or something, and they could instantly go into their Find My app and turn on the lost mode. But yes, this is a very interesting problem.
So I guess related to that, so the Celular Seguro app that you
Yes.
mentioned, so that, I guess that requires that you have another device, or?
Yes, so that is true. What it does is, so we didn't test it out since it was all in Portuguese, but what we understood from the documentation was you kind of need to register first before your phone is lost. And then, kind of connect everything that's your bank and your network provider and everything. And once you do lose your phone, you still need access to a device wherein you can log into the portal and then start these coordinated blocks.
Are there fake versions of that portal? That seems dangerous.
That is true. I seriously cannot tell you anything about that. But yes, a centralized thing, I see where it could go wrong.
Great. All right. Well, let's thank Divyanshu again.